Good morning. So we have been studying and using así se dice, right?
Yeah.
And you have been doing a beautiful job learning about literal and conceptual translations.
Today we're in a transitional bilingual program that begins with a 90-10 model in kindergarten, and by the time they're in second and third grade, it's a 60-40. So 60% of their time is in Spanish and 40% of their time is in English.
Our signal word that we're going to use is heroic.
Heroic, someone who is very brave.
Beautiful. I'm so glad you remember. Thank you for remembering that. So today I brought you a passage out of this book, The First Day in Grapes.
So the strategy in this classroom is called así se dice, and the strategy is really, it's purposeful translation. It's involving kids in purposeful translation of a passage either from Spanish to English or English to Spanish.
So remember the power of translation. When we translate something, we might think word for word first and try to make sense of it, but then we always try to think, what is the author really trying to tell me here?
The themes that they've been working on in a variety of contexts. In their literacy class, they've been reading and writing, talking about these topics. And today we've chosen a passage that is a little more complex, that has some nuance to it, where the language is going to be challenging. When they really have to work at translating it, then they have to look at the nuance across languages and how one language may communicate the same idea, but do it in a slightly different way.
Así se dice. You have an idea? Okay. Read it one more time. What's the question?
Tomas el pelo, dijo Chico. Se preguntó cómo una señorita como ella podría patear tan lejos.
Turn to your neighbor, please. And we're eye to eye, knee to knee.
First of all, everyone in the room got to answer the question, right? So it's not a teacher asks the question and one or two students get to share out, but that the teacher asks the question and everyone gets to turn and speak about that particular question. We know that every student got the opportunity to share their thinking while on the carpet, and then to hear the thinking of a few others before they return to their desk to work with an individual partner.
Heroic.
Someone who is very brave.
All right. So number 14. What did you come up with your partner?
Why did you take my hair? Said Chico. He asked if he was a girl that could bat from far away.
Interesting.
They go back to their desks where they have more intimate conversations about what do we think this word means? Are we saying this right? But they're really working through trying to come up with the best translation they can of the passage that they've seen, just with a single partner. Now, they get to hear a little bit about what other kids are saying at their desk, and that's fine, right? Like, the whole idea is that we learn from others in our environment, and so we want to see lots of talk, lots of negotiation.
Does it say like or why? Or who?
I already read it. Like. Como una señorita, como ella podía batear tan lejos. So, he has, like a woman,
A girl that could hit a baseball really far.
yeah, kind of like a home run.
A little lady talks like a little lady. No, it's a señorita, so yeah, like a lady. Yeah, lady.
For the most part, what we saw today was kids working through it more on a word-by-word basis. But you saw them take things like the word señorita, and some of them were like, is that lady or is that woman? And, how do we know the difference between that? Or the como y como, where one has an accent and one doesn't. And why? Are we going to use like both times? No, because that doesn't make sense, right? The words really are different. Se preguntó was challenging for them today because that reflexive verb is a little bit, the way we express that in English is quite different. After the students have negotiated and each of the pairs has come up with their version of the translation, the students do what we call a gallery walk.
Remember that this is the opportunity for you as historians to look at each other's papers and give feedback, but also to think about how you translated it and see if somebody else translated it the same way. This is your time to get ideas from each other, to give some positive, constructive feedback. You do need to read. Move one table at a time. Are you ready?
You grabbed my hair, said Chico. He asked himself like a lady back so far.
Like, we didn't write like you, and we didn't like.
Did they do a good job? What did they do well? The translation was good.
So they go around, they have multiple opportunities to read and give feedback, but also to compare their own, after which they're invited to go back to theirs and make any changes that make sense to them, to get it as nuanced as they can before they go back to whole group on the floor.
So today we found a phrase or an idiomatic expression that you have not been familiar with even in Spanish, right?
They start sharing out again. Here, what wording did your group use versus a different group?
Me tomas el pelo. Let's just talk about that part. Okay, what did you have for that? Just that part. Go ahead.
Why did you grab my hair?
Oh, you put it in the form of a question. Okay.
Did you pull my hair?
Pull my hair? Listen to him use his expression just like if he were reading a book. Go ahead.
I figured out that Chico, the first letter is a capital letter.
Excellent.
As the kids talk through, you can hear them being metacognitively aware. They're like, oh, it has a capital letter. If it has a capital letter, it's a proper noun. Proper noun indicates it's a boy's name and not necessarily boy as just a generic noun.
We talked about our question marks. We've talked about proper nouns and capitalizing the name. So now would we say that it was kid or boy? Or do we know that it's somebody's name? What do we think about that?
It's probably the people's name, because if it was lowercase, it would mean something else.
All of those little nuances of language are what we want kids to be attending to, so that they start to see even the written clues that help us to gain meaning from passage.
So there's a phrase here. For me, I had to think about, what does that se mean? I know preguntó is in the past, but why is this se here?
Another was se preguntó, which seems easy, seems basic. This is a phrase that these kids have heard most of their lives, right? But when they tried to put it into English, they had to struggle with who was asking whom.
I think that he's asking himself in his mind, so he's asking himself the question.
He's asking himself the question.
Because I don't see anybody else. I'm just thinking that he's talking to himself in his mind.
Some of you had he asked. And then we also had wondered as a possibility. Who is he? Who is that referring to?
Chico.
Chico, beautiful.
That was a point that most of them had not put in their writing, and yet as they talked it through on the carpet, they all got there. And so each piece of the Así se dice becomes important because kids know what they've already come up with, and then they learn from the collective wisdom in the group.
Let's see what Mr. King Perez said. He said, "Are you fooling me?" Chico said. He wondered how a little señorita like Miss Andrews could hit the ball so far. She cheers for herself? So we chose the same word, wondered. Good job, Metzli. All right.
We know from research very clearly that you have to have multiple opportunities to practice. You need to have comprehensible input and comprehensible output in order to acquire a language. Así se dice is part of a larger project that we've been doing for 13 years, and so it's a small piece of a biliteracy component. We know that kids are learning better and becoming more biliterate without losing either of their languages, which is a goal, right? That it's not just that we're in bilingualism to acquire English, but that we want these kids to be really bilingual and bicultural. And so we want to build and maintain both languages over time.
So think of all the powerful knowledge you have about the two languages and how many things we were able to talk about. Okay?
English is she and he.
That's right. That's what we need to have to make sense of it. So all of those things are happening in your brains as you are translating. Isn't that amazing? That's powerful stuff. You are like superheroes with two languages.